I'm going to hand it off to Shannon to get us kicked off for our next session.
Hey, everybody. So Corey and I are going to spend a little time here talking about our quarterly business review and the QBR metrics that business dev puts together for all of us. So right now, we currently have a limited number of clients receiving quarterly business review metrics from the business development staff. Some of these clients are also having a QBR meeting once a quarter. One goal of the CRM team is to expand that so every network is getting their metrics. It's important for the GlobalNOC to share metrics with each of our clients, regardless of your network size. Currently, it's a very manual process that the business development staff goes through for getting the metrics. And our hopes is to get that automated. So it makes it much easier to deliver metrics to each of you. Right now, the metrics are delivered via PDF and an email where we, I think, cover kind of the high points of what we saw over the last quarter based on the metrics. And I think we will still do that, even if we were able to automate it and put it on, I think some type of dashboard is where we're leaning towards, but still have some kind of summary email that discusses the uniqueness of what we saw in the metrics, if anything fell outside the normal ranges that you have, and if they're positive or negative events. The QBR meetings will consist of the CRM, the systems liaison, and the service desk, along with representatives from your network. We're happy to discuss all the metrics if you don't want to just talk about the things that fell outside the normal things. So once we have metrics for everyone, your CRM will work with you to determine how you'd like your QBR process to go. The big change that we came up with is kind of 3 buckets we felt the metrics should fall into. First one would be actionable items. Second one is client requests. And then the third one is your volume metrics. So Corey's going to spend some time today talking about what we currently do for QBRs and then where we're looking to take them. And then we're hoping to get some feedback from you all on what you'd like to see there as well. Right now we're kind of going with what we think, but definitely your feedback is critical and important to make sure we're giving you what you want as well. So Corey, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, yeah, so these next 2 slides are just kind of highlighting what Shannon mentioned and where we're at, where we're going. Today, a lot of the people that have QBRs are doing them in a service-based metrics. So when we look at them, we categorize them. Are they in the service desk? Are they network engineering? Are they systems? Some teams have a few extra categories. They're going to be categories that match what they're doing. So if they have their own network engineers or their own systems, we would track those as well and categorize them in that way. And a lot of it focuses on workload metrics. How many tickets have you created? How many tickets of each category? How many edits are we making? How many phone calls? Those types of things. As Shannon mentioned, it's in a PowerPoint. And another thing that's interesting is that we track a lot of the work outside of the QBR. So let's say we determine that there's a problem with the volume or there's a weird trend that we're seeing. We would take that, hand that off to someone else, and then they would take care of that. We might never update it again. We might not talk about it at the QBR again. So that's kind of what we do today, where we're at. This all came out of some older versions of the data, starting in footprints, and we've kind of worked our way here, replicating what we used to do. And so it's time to kind of update that. So as Shannon mentioned, we're trying to put these into 3 buckets with the action items, things that you guys are requesting, and then the volume metrics. Not all of them will have action items every time, and so we'll kind of make adjustments as we do it. And instead of focusing on the services or the team supporting it, we wanted to look at some KPIs. This will kind of take us away from some of the volume metrics and into some more of the qualitative analysis instead of the quantitative analysis. By looking at key factors, instead of just looking at total number of incidents created, maybe looking at how long it took us to resolve them, or looking at how much effort went into them, and looking at those types of metrics instead of just the volume itself. We're trying to do a lot of this through dynamic metrics inside of ServiceNow. We'll talk about some of those cool things that we're testing out today, and then putting all that into a ServiceNow dashboard. There's an example image here. We're trying to make these available for everybody. So if you have access to ServiceNow, you can go in today and look at the boards as we're developing these. This is actually a live QBR dashboard. I'm trying not to talk about any of the networks on here, but every network should be able to go in and look at their metrics. We're also going to be working with the CRMs to track those action items and then provide updates during any QBR meetings that we might have or in the presentations. That way there's some continuous discussion about those topics. So if we're struggling to understand the importance of one of the metrics, we'll bring up more explanation later, or we'll do some digging, and then we'll work with the CRMs to make sure that that gets to the right people. So we wanted to talk about some of the updated metrics today. These are things where we took feedback from the QBRs we're giving today. We took some feedback from the CRMs and combined it with some new features that we have in ServiceNow and kind of expanding that. One of the things to point out is that I'm not going to talk about all of the metrics, I'm not going to walk you through each of the individual ones. I've tried to put them into buckets, and these buckets are the same theme you might see across multiple different types of tasks. We use the ITIL model a lot, so you'll see incident, problem, change, service requests come up. But we're not going to look at like incident looks like this, problem looks like this. We're just going to look at overall the general things. So the first one we're going to look on, and I'll say please jump in with comments or questions or concerns at any point. I can talk forever if we want about metrics, but my goal is really to have you guys ask questions and for me to kind of get some feedback on where we're at. So we're looking at request breakdown here as our first one. I mentioned before that you'll see some of these across multiple different tasks. So this is available for incident, change, and the request we're looking at here. And it's going to be based on some sort of category. For requested items, it's based on the service catalog items. So for those that have like a robust service catalog, you would see multiple different categories here. In this case, the network we're looking at has it broken down into things like network requests, peering requests, provisioning. And we can look at the different volume here and some of the breakdowns based on those categories. Why this is important is because we want to be able to have a clean look at where you're spending your time and where we're spending our time. And so we're able to do things like look at anomalies and growth, or look at changes in whether or not you're tracking the right things. So one of the questions we get a lot are, how much effort are we spending towards like BGP peers, or how much are we spending towards let's say we're using some of the above the net services. How long are we spending on video services, or how much are we spending on firewall services? We don't really have a good way to track that unless there's a category in the service catalog. So this report allows us to look at what you guys are spending your time, where you might want to focus something. If you're seeing a huge growth in, say, one category, let's say, for example, your firewall service starts to grow drastically, then instead of just looking at the volume of catalog tasks, being like, okay, we're having a lot more, what's going on, we can focus on those firewall requests. And then we know we can either try to figure out why there's a bunch more. Is there a problem with our firewall service? Are we just getting more new customers on it? What's happening? And then that gives you a place to focus and actually take action to try to improve that. Or maybe it's okay. Maybe there's not a problem. The anomaly just is an anomaly. Looking at this one, there was a huge spike in provisioning requests in Q3 of 2020. That kind of makes sense when you are looking at like the new school year and those types of things. So that's what we look at with these types. With request breakdown, obviously this is just for requests, but as I mentioned, there is for incident and change, and you might look at different things like, why did we have an increase in vendor changes over this month or that month? Why did we have an increase in circuit outages versus customer outages? And that way we're able to target it instead of just looking at the overall volume of those types of tasks. Before I move on to the next one, are there any questions about the breakdowns like this? Okay. So the next one we're going to look at is a little bit different, but it kind of stems out of the ones we've seen in previous QBRs. So in previous QBRs, we looked at what we might call like ticket volume, where we just capture the total number of tasks created. And that's cool. That's great to see what that is. But what that doesn't capture is what does your workload look like on a normal day or on a normal month or normal quarter or whatever it is. Because you might only be creating 5 new tasks, but if you have a backlog of 105 new tasks every day, it can kind of be a little overwhelming depending on the size of your team. So what we look at instead in this metric, which we're calling total active task, is taking a snapshot each day and figuring how many tasks were active on that day, how many tasks were in your backlog maybe, or were just there in your list of tasks to create. And what we're able to do is to kind of highlight some of those trends. So if we're seeing your backlog increase, or if we're seeing this task decrease, that can kind of tell us something about your workload. Like an increase is going to show us that you're getting more tasks than you're able to complete each week or each day or whatever it is. Or if we're seeing it go down, like in the case of this one with our orange line there kind of trending downward, it looks like the overall backlog and the amount of work that we're kind of accumulating over time is shrinking, which is great because that means we're able to focus on more projects or whatever else is going on. One of the things that's nice about this metric, and this is a common theme, is we're able to do more breakdowns in this. So we're able to look at it on just incidents or just catalog tasks. Maybe we want to look at it for just one team. You want to know what your network engineering team has in their backlog, or what our network engineering team has in our backlog. You're able to limit this based on those filters, and then that allows you to make targeted changes. You can go in and you can say, okay, I see a huge increase overall, but all that increase is in the service desk. Why does the service desk have a big increase? Or seeing a big increase on my network engineering team, what did we change to maybe cause that increase? And so we're looking at the trends here more than anything. We're not necessarily concerned about how many tickets there are. You know, in this case, we're looking at an average somewhere around 200 active tasks at any given time. But maybe that's not a problem. Maybe there's something like provisioning requests or admin requests, or you've got some peering requests that take a while. And so it's not so much how much is there, but the changes in those. I mentioned a couple of things related to targeted task resolution, which is where you might choose a specific type of category and look at that and figure out why there's trends there. But one of the things you can also look at is capacity planning. Let's say you've got like a network engineering team, you've got 3 engineers, and your workload is just constantly increasing. And you're going to get to the point where you can't like take on new work, or you can't take on new things. This would allow you to kind of identify that and look at your capacity. On the same front, maybe you're seeing a huge increase and you want to try to figure out how to create more space for your engineers. This would allow you to target where that increase is happening. It also might be something too where you're just not closing out tickets and you need to identify where that's happening. You'll see in this case, there's a couple of huge spikes down, especially in the January 2022 timeframe. And with that huge spike down, somebody probably went in and completed a bunch of tasks. Maybe they had been completed previously and were just closed then, or maybe they were finalizing a big project with a bunch of tasks. So you'll also be able to see that. You'll see there's a couple of drops down in this one where it's going to increase over the week. And then on Friday, when everybody's wrapping things up, they close out their task and it closes. Or maybe there's a meeting where you close a bunch of things. So you'll be able to see those trends and identify what that looks like long term. Are there any questions about this one? Any things you guys would want to see or go from here? All right, we'll move on to the next one then. So the next one we're going to look at, and this is one we got a lot of requests for, but we've had some trouble with it in the past. And that is number of tasks that were escalated from the GlobalNOC, either from like our service desk or from our tier 2 or tier 3 engineering over to your guys' network. So in the past, just talking about this a little bit, the best way to kind of handle this was to look at the incidents, pull a list of all the incidents, pull a list of all the incidents that had been assigned to whatever the first escalation point on our side is, then take a look at a list of all the incidents for the first on your side. And then we took that list and we combined them together in Excel. We created some fancy scripts in Excel, and then it gave us a split of how many tasks had been escalated to maybe multiple groups, or more escalated to from ours to your group. And it's okay, but it took a lot of work per network, because we'd have to go and grab special reports for each of them, do the work in Excel, and it wasn't complicated work. It was work. And so one of the things that we're able to do now with some work we're doing in ServiceNow is maybe put that into something that's a little bit more automated. So we're using this new thing, and it's kind of under development still. We haven't put it into production yet, but I do expect to get it released here in the next couple of weeks. Where we're able to create dynamic filters, and the dynamic filters in ServiceNow on the back end is just like a script, and it looks for something specific, and then it gives you a limited data set that you can then look at just that. For those that do a lot of reporting in ServiceNow, you might see this if you use the dynamic domain selector for those that have lots of domains, or if you use the assignment group one where it says, look at anything where I'm in the assignment group. those are all things that were pre-built out, but we're kind of adding our own. So in this case, we created one that looks at the same thing we were doing by exporting the data reports, putting them in Excel. This is able to do it on the back end. And then at any point, you can set up a report that looks at those types of things. So this one's still in progress. We don't have the final option built because we need to do some indicators and some other things to make it work. But what we're looking at specifically is the percentage of tasks escalated from the GlobalNOC from our either our engineering groups or our service desk. And the way that what we're hoping to gather here is to identify trends again. Is there an increase in the ones that we're escalating? Are there increases in maybe the number of incidents or number of service requests? And then looking at what those are so that we can either provide targeted training where we're able to say, hey, there's this new thing, maybe it's firewalls. We don't really understand it. We need your help and understanding it. And then that'll allow us to reduce the amount that we escalate. Or maybe it's a process improvement. Maybe the process is designed to always engage tier 3 after a certain while. And maybe if we make some adjustments to that process, we can reduce those. Because ultimately our goal is to call you guys less. So we don't want to keep calling you for everything. And so this metric would allow us to identify those things and kind of make some changes instead of just relying on general like, oh, I think that this feels like the busiest thing. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. The reports that we're looking at on the screen are just a pie chart of these are two different metrics, which is why there's two different numbers. But in one, we're able to just to see the total number of escalated tasks, and in the other, we get a pie chart of the categories, so you can see what types of things we're moving over. In this case, we're looking at incidents, so got some that are investigating, some that are hardware, and see the list there.
Hey, Corey.
Yeah.
I have a question. So I see that a lot of this goes from you're looking at things being escalated from the GlobalNOC or from the GlobalNOC to the network in question. Is there any tracking that you can do to see if there's anything going on with a specific member? Like if you...
we don't have anything in here in the presentation today, but the answer is a soft yes. So we do. There are some metrics today, and I'm working with SMS on a new dashboard here shortly for Ocean that'll have some of those types of metrics as kind of like the starter to see how it works. But it's heavily reliant on the data inside of being inside of ServiceNow. And so SMS has done some work to improve that, and we were able to do some of those metrics on a per customer basis. So I say it's a soft yes because you should be able to see some things shortly that'll improve that. And you can create dashboards where you can select maybe one or two customers, and you just want to look at those two customers and have some similar stats for them. I don't know that we'll talk about them during QBRs, but we would make those dashboards available for like your member services people.
Yeah, I think it would be really valuable to be able to see if you have particular members that are struggling, or if you've rolled out new services on the network and you notice that there is an uptick in tickets. I mean, that would be really helpful as far as member services, but also just overall having that view into the well-being of, the services that you have out there. So thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, I actually had this crazy idea as I was preparing this presentation. We have these dynamic filters. And I know that there are some networks where your member services team might have like a category of customers that they focus on, or maybe they own like 3 or 4 high profile customers. Finding a way to document that somewhere inside of ServiceNow, and then setting that as a filter where you can say, show me my networks. So where we could create one dashboard, you log in and it just shows you the ones you need to care about. So that's something we're looking at as well as of a couple of days ago when I was finishing the presentation prep.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Are there any other questions here? All right, we'll keep going from this one then. And this one's, like I said, under development, and so you should see some new cool things coming out of it later. Somewhat related to our engagement from GlobalNOC to your network is the engagement from GlobalNOC to the vendors. So, these are going to be certain things like maybe you've got really chatty vendors, or maybe you've got vendors that have started to have big problems. And so we're going to look at a couple of different things under vendor engagement. The first one is like the percentage of tasks that require engagement. And kind of what we're looking at here, and this is going to be the bar graph that you see at the bottom, is trying to figure out how many of these things will eventually get escalated to the vendor. Is it going to be something where most of the time it's your customers have problems and you're working with them to fix them? Or is it something where we're going to have these long-term vendor engagements? Part of what we'll be able to do then is to look at those changes in the percentage. You know, on the graph that we're looking at here, you can see a decrease in the number of vendor involved outages, and that does kind of correlate to a decrease in some of the outages. But then looking at like Q1 of 2021 there in that graph, you can see there was an increase in overall, but a decrease in vendor. So that gives us something to look at and target. Somewhat also related to this is it gives us the opportunity to look at the vendors themselves and look at their the total incidents. So the picture at the top is a list view. Again, this is a different list view than the one on the bottom, mixing some of our networks here and just looking at what we can do. So we're able to grab a whole list of maybe incidents and when they started, and I did not put a ton of stats here because then you'd be able to figure out who it was, but you can see that we can pull a bunch of the related stats to those vendor incidents. And then if you see a problem, you got a problem with Zayo, you got a problem with AT&T, you can just go to the dashboard, look at those tickets, and then get straight access to the incidents or to the tickets themselves, so that your investigation doesn't take you, 2 or 3 weeks of going to the service desk, asking some questions, them coming back, you answering more questions, going back and forth. The CRM can do it during the meeting real quick, pull it up, look at it. You can ask about it in the QBR. We've got it right there on the dashboard. And then you can go to your meeting with, say, Zayo, and be like, hey, Zayo, we saw an increase in tickets this month. Here's all of the ticket numbers. We need you to help us figure out why we had an increase of X percentage. Obviously, 9 in a month is not a huge amount. That's just what we saw for that one. Caroline's face makes me think that it is a huge amount, but I didn't think it was that many, but here we are. It also gives resolution times on the far right. These are kind of somewhat inflated, and we'll talk about resolution times later on a little bit more. But it does give you a little bit of a understanding of where your vendors might be. These are total incident resolution times, not just vendor resolutions. We might have some cool things to do with that long term to make that show just the vendor resolution. But you can see here, you could go in and be like, hey, it took us 15,000 minutes, and maybe we change these to not just be minutes or be hours instead. But it took us 15,000 minutes to resolve this. It was only a moderate issue, so not a huge big deal, but what was going on? And then you can have that during your vendor meetings as you're discussing those topics. I did mention already that we do want to expand this to include response times. So there are some, we'll talk about overall response times later on, but there might be some good ideas here in terms of like SLAs and those types of features that you might want to track, where you might have an SLA with a vendor. Say Zayo is like a 4-hour SLA. Finding a way to be able to track how long from when we engage Zayo to when they completed their task is something we're looking at with the service desk to kind of expand on over the next couple of months here. Are there any questions here about the vendor?
I'll just comment that I think this is really an excellent resource as far as networks, like being able to identify where your vendors are falling short or where they're shining. This is the kind of information that's really powerful. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, one of the things that we realized when we were going through this QBR review process is that we spent a lot of time focusing on what we were doing and not as much time focusing on the general health of the network. And I think that we would get a lot of questions in those meetings about, oh, what about this? Or why did we see that increase? And so some of the hope we have with these KPIs is to try to make that so that it comes out during the QBR. So we don't have to go and do a whole bunch of investigation and look at a bunch of things. It should be pretty evident why we saw that increase or where you want to focus your time as on the health of the network. All right, any other questions before we go to this next one here? All right. So in each of our QBRs, we had always done some syseng metrics, and those had changed a little bit over the years. And with service now, as you guys know, it's a little bit harder to get access to your systems tickets. And we've come out with the ticket portal that you guys saw earlier. But we were providing these metrics in the QBRs, and it kind of was a lot of metrics that maybe didn't have as many things that were super actionable, or maybe they didn't make as much sense. And so we kind of took our syseng metrics as a whole, and we kind of shortened what we were doing and looked at the metrics that actually mattered. A lot of the metrics you'll see in systems tickets are similar to the ones we talked about earlier, like the total active systems task. You're already getting weekly reports if you're on those lists working with your CRM. And so we wanted to focus on just some of the KPIs, and the big ones we looked at were going to be the product. So here we're just looking at incident, but we do capture this for other things. But looking at the product, and then what was development versus operations. So we're able to take those tasks and show, we're using these pie charts here because we tried bar graphs and it got a little overwhelming. So we looked at these just to show you where you're at, and then during the QBRs, the systems liaison will come in and talk about some of the projects that they're doing and where you might see these increases. Like, why did we have 163 auto rancid tickets? Is that even a bad thing, or are those just automated? And so the focus here, though, is to get rid of some of the extra stuff that was in there and focus on just the core components. And that's something that you'll see in the QBR as a whole. It's a lot of information. There's a lot of data. But we're trying to get it to the things that are actionable and the things that matter, and the things that fit into those three buckets of what are our action items, what do you ask for, and what shows overall volume of the work. And so that's what we're seeing here. There's not a ton to highlight, but I wanted to show that just because you guys will see, those that have QBRs today will see a decrease in the total number of those reports that we had. All right, and then one of the ones that we wanted to highlight, and we'll kind of see, we see today and we'll see more as we're going forward, is the user satisfaction. We capture two different metrics with that. One is overall total number of satisfaction responses and whether they were satisfied, extra satisfied, or just like not satisfied. And so we do some work, and there are some new processes that'll make some changes to that, where if they say we're unsatisfied, it'll ask for a reason why. And we're working on some things inside of the customer service project that'll help improve some of the responses that we get. But overall, what we're looking at here is trying to figure out customer engagement and how they feel about the overall service. We've collected these stats for a couple of years now. I say that, and I feel like it's been like 8 years now. And so we're just trying to find a good way to represent those and continuously improve those. One of the things you'll see here is that we don't get a huge response rate. Most networks are somewhere below 3%. You do see a weird spike here that was anomalous in the 5.6%. But we're looking for some help, and we talked about this during the QBRs, and getting your communities engaged and responding to those surveys that we send out, mostly so that we can tell you how well we're doing or how well they think you're doing. I'm sure you guys are collecting your own stats, but these are kind of the live ones. You have an incident, we resolve it, you get a notification, and we ask you how well it went. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any questions on this one. This one's one that we're kind of keeping around, but we also will be asking for hope and trying to get more responses from each of you. All right, cool. And then the last one is the one that we get the most questions about. And we give a big disclaimer here, this one's still under development. We're not actually doing some of the metrics inside of ServiceNow. We need to make that transition at some point in the future. And that's going to be the time-based metrics. And these are going to be things like time to resolution, time to creation, time to first update. These time to metrics are able to be captured inside of ServiceNow. One of the things that's interesting is that they have to be collected in real time a lot of times. ServiceNow tracks everything you do. They have all those logs, but the logs are so large that trying to go back and run metrics on them will kind of clog up your system a little bit. So it's better to capture them real time and get the real stats instead of trying to go through all the logs and scrape some of the data out of it. And so that's what we're trying to improve upon. We have a lot of them set up today, and they've been set up for a while. But our data is not super clean in these metrics because they are heavily relying on ServiceNow. So I'll give you an example. We have a few of them where we're looking at time to first update from network engineering teams. And a lot of times when there's an incident and the network engineers get assigned an incident task, their first update in ServiceNow is to close their incident task and say, here's all the work that I did. They put a huge update, ton of notes, ton of information. But the only time they ever interact with the ticket is to say that they're done and close out their task. And so the time to first update and the time to resolution is kind of lining up in a lot of these. We're seeing a very similar time frame just because of that. So as you guys are thinking about some of these metrics you want to collect and the importance of some of them, like in this case, time to first update is an awesome metric you'd like to give out to your customers. Sometimes they require a lot more work inside of ServiceNow. And so the discussion we'll have with each of you is, how important is that metric? How important is it that you collect that? You know, in one case, we have a network who's doing some time tracking. They're tracking how much time each task is taking, and they're using ServiceNow to capture that time, allowing things like manual input, but also ServiceNow, if you pull up the task, has an auto timer feature that can collect how much time you're using. And then we're able to run some reports on that. And that's because that network felt like that was an important change for them, was to be able to collect that data. So as you're thinking about some of these, like the time to creation, we're able to capture because that's Service Desk creating that task. Time to resolution, we're able to capture that. But some of the like time to first update or time to first response or how long is it taking the customer, those types of things may require a change in how you use ServiceNow and how your workload works. Are there any questions on this one before we move on? All right, cool. So the last thing, and we've left a little bit of time here at the end. What are the metrics you're interested in collecting? What are the things that we're not doing today that you would like to see? We've kind of tried to take a lot of the input we've received so far and put it into these new metrics, but what else are you looking for? Super chatty room here today.
Well, I'll just continue my chattiness. For iLight, Media, and Gigapop, I think the ones that you've covered are spot on, unless we could, once you get your soft yes to a hard yes, being able to really narrow down what members, what's happening at the member level, I think that would be really beneficial. So
Yeah,
thanks for all your work
and
on this.
that's one we've heard from other people as well, as getting that. So we're putting some effort into that, the member one. And we do have some features that we can use today. We're just trying to make the data a little bit better. One of the things that's kind of cool about that we've been working on is also capturing parent organizations. So let's say you've got a school district and we're tracking the school that's affected inside of the incident. We're also tracking the parent school district, and then we can report on that. Or if you've got a college with multiple campuses, or like looking at NOAA, if you've got a department with multiple locations and you want to report on all those, we're also trying to capture that. So you can focus on like the higher level categories for some of your dashboards, as opposed to having to remember what 5 school districts or what 5 schools are in this district, or how many campuses does Marion have again? You know, those types of questions that you might see.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
For those that are doing QBRs today, are there things that we didn't highlight that you want us to keep around?
Hey, Corey, one thing I was thinking when you started off your presentation, you talked about how in each domain now you have probably a dashboard that people can start seeing as we're making changes.
Mhm.
Maybe we need to send something out like just reminding people how to change their dashboard or whatever, make sure they can find it.
Yeah, and we can even do live demos are dangerous, I know, but
Be careful.
we can show people what it looks like today. Assuming iLight doesn't mind us showing off their data on their dashboard.
No, I think that's good.
It'll be fine.
Awesome. All right. Let me get this going here. Let ServiceNow catch up to my mind. All right, so inside of ServiceNow, and let's make sure I got the right one. Here we go. All right, so you guys can see my screen here, just the ServiceNow dashboard.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so when you're inside of ServiceNow, if you hit the home button, it'll always take you back to your dashboard. Some people typically start on Taskmon or whatever else they've got pulled up. So in this case, you can just click on this drop down. And if you're not me and you see the QBR dashboard at the top, you can actually search for it. Just look for quarterly business review. And there's a whole bunch of them, but the RD one is the one that you want. For those wondering, RD just stands for responsive dashboard. It's the new version of ServiceNow's dashboards. If you don't find it there, you're having problems, you can also hit this weird little boxes, and then you can look at all the ones that are shared with you. And there's a whole bunch of dashboards out there, various different things. But you'll be able to find the quarterly business review there. If you can't find it, let us know. And then inside of there, you'll see things like user satisfaction responses. iLight has had all very satisfied in their 3 responses they got. You can see things like outage trend sources. And as we're making these changes and coming up with some of these, you're going to be seeing some of these in here. We also have created some dashboards that we use as well. So one of the ones that we often take a look at are human error ones. So internal human error, how many times did we take down our network accidentally? iLight's killing it here. But then we also have like vendor human error. We've got some here that we might go talk to the vendor for. Or customer human error. There's less you can do for those, but it gives you some chance to look at some of those ones. And so we've got some human error stats, and you'll see a whole bunch of these kind of improve and change as we go through the process. We do them as part of our regular ServiceNow releases, which I think is bi-weekly now. And you guys should get the change notes where we talk about the dashboards we release. There's also another one that if you guys are interested in is also available, and that's the Performance Analytics dashboard. Performance Analytics is the package that ServiceNow offers that allows us to do some of these fancier metrics and do some analysis. And so things like all active tasks are there, and you can see a breakdown. I mentioned you could look at it just by service group. So if you wanted to look at just iLight network engineering, you can look at that. For those of us that see everything, there's a whole list of things there. There you go. And then everything below here will adjust, and you can just look at that. If you were like, hey, I really want to know why I had this spike on this day, you can actually dive into it. And we'll do a whole nother session on how to use dashboards at a later GlobalNOC Connects. But once you're inside of here, you can look at the records, you can do some analysis if you want to do forecasting, or you want to look year over year as opposed to, year to month. These are all things that you would be able to do. And then if you had questions, we could help you out with. In this case, we've got this trend bar with some forecasting. So as you can see, there's some crazy variation. So we've got a huge forecasting band, but yeah, that's kind of how you would get to that dashboard and what you can do with it.